comfortable fiscal position, approximately with over 1 lakh crore rupees cushion, is available to the government on back of the RBI bonanza and better than expected tax collections. We have with us a very esteemed panel joining in to talk about what the industry expects, what India Inc. needs to do, and of course, talk about the journey and the building blocks to Viksit Bharat. We have with us Anisha, President FICCI, Harsha Vardhan Agarwal, Senior Vice President FICCI, and Subrakanta Panda, Immediate Past President FICCI. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today on the show. Anisha, I'll start with you first. And as the President of FICCI, let's talk about the mood before we go into this budget. How optimistic, how buoyant, and how confident is India Inc. feeling about growth, about demand, about generally business?
Samina, good afternoon. Pleasure to be here with you. Overall, I'd say the mood is balanced, tending towards optimistic. There are some industries which are clearly very buoyant right now. Real estate's a classic example there. There are some that are moving along quite well. You see tourism actually probably a little more on the buoyant side as well. The auto industry has been moving quite well, seen some signs of slowness, but really not very significant. And overall, therefore, we feel that while consumption is lower than what it has been last year, the economy is still in very good shape.
Oh, optimistic. It's good to hear that. I believe you're echoing the sentiment of the industry, not just of M&M. But Harsha, I'll come to you next. We've talked extensively about Viksit Bharat and the road and the journey to that. In your opinion, what are expectations? We saw what happened at the interim budget where things were left at that. It was a short 56-minute speech trying to say enough and leaving you wanting more. As we go into this budget, what are your expectations?
So I think we want, investment which leads to inclusive growth. I think that is what will overall propel the growth in the economy. And when we say inclusive growth, the employment should grow. At the same time, how does the government improve the skills? That is where we need to see government intervening. They have done a lot of things. Initiatives has been announced. Those are again something which we need to take forward.
You're right. Skills, employment, bringing it up to the curve. I believe a lot has changed pre-pandemic and the world we live in today. But I'll come to Subrakanta as well. Mr. Panda, what are your expectations? Let's start with that. Highlight the top 3 key initiatives you believe the government should be undertaking, and start with what it is in terms of this budget.
Samina, first of all, thank you for having us on the show. Now, in terms of the top 2 or 3 recommendations that FICCI has had, I think it's to continue with the good work which we have seen over the last few budgets. And I think topmost on that list is government spending on infrastructure, which of course the interim budget had an announcement which took it up to 11.11 trillion rupees. And that is something that has worked out very well during the pandemic and its immediate aftermath. And while everyone agrees that private sector's spending needs to increase, and indeed it is beginning to, but I think the focus of government infrastructure spending on various things is a very productive and good way to go about it. The second thing I would say is that we are certainly looking for measures which will continue to improve the ease of doing business and reduce the cost of doing business. And that is particularly important from a manufacturing sector point of view, which really needs to do well in order to complement what the services sector is doing in terms of creating jobs. And the third thing I would look at is some simplification in the tax regime, whether it is in terms of the TDS or TCS rates. From our point of view, we have suggested measures which would lead towards greater simplification and thereby do away with classification disputes, etc. and where litigation has already been initiated, what is the best way forward in terms of bringing that litigation to an end, so that industry can focus on doing what it does best, which is contribute to the nation's growth.
You're absolutely right, and I believe everyone would resonate with that. Anant Goenka as well joins in. Anant, how do you feel ahead of the budget? What is your mood? Are you excited? Are you optimistic? What is demand? What is growth looking like right now, just ahead of the budget?
Right. No, I'm fairly optimistic about the economic situation right now. The good thing about the government now coming in is a sign of continuity. Even with the cabinet postings that we've seen, it is a sign of continuity. In the last few years, we have seen a very long-term vision that has been set out by the finance minister and continuously acting on that year on year. This year being the first year of the new government, in a way, we hope to see again another 5-year vision from the government and a continuity of the past that has been happening. The few actions that certainly, as my colleagues shared, continued investment in infrastructure, boosting manufacturing, looking at employment as an important area of job creation, and finally, how do we boost demand to make sure that private investment increases. We've been resting a lot on the public investment part. We need to boost private investment going forward.
Oh, I think that is unanimous sentiment across the board, Anand. But Anish, I'll come back to you on consumption. We saw how Bharat voted a few months ago. Rural consumption has been a sour point in the country now for quite some time. Some may even go to the extent of calling it rural distress. What do you think needs to be done to boost rural consumption? Because from what I understand, most people who've gone back to villages are even refusing to come back to work, it seems.
So consumption has been slightly lower, 6.8% in fiscal 23, down to 4% in fiscal 24. But on balance, Savina, it's really not that bad. And while, yes, there have been signs of rural distress, if we look at it over the past 4 years, rural actually is held up very well. If we look at tractor sales as a proxy, the tractor industry grew 27% in the first year after COVID, and grew 9% in the year after that, and then had a slight decline in the following year, followed by a flattish year that we expect this year. So on balance, if you look at a 4-year period, the cumulative growth is really not that bad. So yes, we've seen some vast increases and we've seen some softness around it, but it's not something that concerns us. There may be some measures that are required, but we still feel from an industry standpoint that the key focus has to be on long-term growth, on long-term capital formation, on investment, on infrastructure, on making India the manufacturing hub of the world by reducing cost of manufacturing, reducing logistics costs. These are the key areas that are going to put India in great stead going forward. And we will see some softness in some areas, but overall the economy is in such strong shape that the softness in those pockets doesn't really worry us a whole lot.
We shall take a cue from that, because you're right. If India's got to become a manufacturing hub, we need to bring our logistic costs, which stand at 14-15% as compared to our peers, where logistic cost stands at 10 to 11%. Anant, I see you nodding. So you want to comment on that? What do you think needs to be done on the logistic front? Because it seems like that is a significant piece of the puzzle to make India and achieve a dream of becoming China +1 or that manufacturing hub we aspire to be.
There are a number of actions
I think for us, our biggest strength in India is our...
Anish, you want to quickly make a point, and then I'll quickly go to Anant on that. I heard both of you talking.
Yes. I'll just say that a lot of actions have been taken already. GST is one aspect in there. But beyond that, we will need some transformative ideas, including setting up new rail corridors, for example, and a number of other actions that will require us to get that cost down much lower. Anant, over to you.
Thank you, Anish. So I think our biggest strength in India is our demographic population that is growing. And all of these people need to be employed, and that will happen through growth in manufacturing. We do have some disadvantages today, but they are getting bridged. As we shared logistic cost, we are seeing huge investments in highways, in railways, in multimodal transportation systems, and we are seeing simplification of whether it is GST, tax systems, where earlier trucks used to be stuck in octroi or toll nakas. That has simplified substantially. The time taken for truck movement has improved. So all of that, I'd say, is a work in progress to improving our logistics costs. So I think that is one key element. Second is, if you look at power cost, we are moving more and more towards renewable power. And as that shift happens, we expect the cost of power to come down. And the third is, as we need to continue to invest in skilling so that productivity improvement in labor too happens. I think as some of these shifts happen, our manufacturing costs will come down, and with the uncertainty and the global stresses that we are seeing between, say, US and China, I think if we can take advantage of this situation, we certainly will be on the route for becoming a manufacturing hub for the world.
Right. Subrakanta, taking a cue from that, we achieve and want to be the manufacturing hub. We need private capex to pick up. One of the points that I've heard a few people talk about is extension of the sunset clause. Now, this comes up every year, I do know, to provide extension of the tax benefit to new manufacturing companies. How important is this, and will it have a significant impact to encourage new facilities being set up?
So this is something that FICCI has strongly advocated for, which is the 115 BAB is what you're referring to, which is the 15% tax rate for new manufacturing units. Now, in the past that has been extended 1 year at a time, and in fact we have made a point that when you're looking at grabbing the opportunity of China plus one, these are decisions which have already been made or are in the process of being made in global boardrooms. And you don't want anything to come in the way of that decision to shift to India. And therefore, instead of extending it by a year or anything of that sort, we think it should be in fact extended over a longer period of time, say 3 to 5 years. Because if that is that shouldn't be the last straw on the camel's back, which detracts from a decision to invest in India. And conversely, I mean, if some investment doesn't come through despite this, then there is no concession which is being granted in any case. So that apart, we've all talked about the importance of manufacturing, because as well as the services sector is doing for us to absorb the young men and women coming into the workforce, the manufacturing sector has to do well. And it has been range bound in the 15 to 17%, 18% range, not just in the last 5 or 10 years, but longer than that. But I think the breakthrough moment is coming because of that laser sharp focus on enhancing the ease of doing business and reducing the cost of doing business. I believe that we are nearing that inflection point where we will be able to sort of break out of this linear mode and look at a step change in terms of growth.
Harsha, keeping the focus with encouraging private capex, many of the PLI schemes are also getting closer to their 5th year. So review seems more or less a given, right? What are you expecting on that? Are you expecting the government to consider more PLI schemes, incentivize participation from MSMEs? How would you read the possible tweaks or changes that the budget could bring along?
I think PLI schemes are important, and it should continue. And from that perspective, the PLI schemes can, first of all, also shift to the MSMEs, or different new sectors needs to be introduced, and whether the employment generated, whether it can move on to the companies, which is generating more employment. So those are some of the expectations and things, which we believe will help in overall improvement of the manufacturing.
Right. Gentlemen, stay with us. We'll slip into a quick break. We'll come back and continue our conversation, so stay tuned.
So, there is good debt and bad debt. I think there's debt which helps you create assets, which we would classify as good debt. For example, if you take an education loan for something which is truly a good program, good course, which is going to take you further, I think that's good debt. It'll pay back. It will take some time, but it'll pay you back well. The problem is if you over leverage, if you take too much debt simply because you assume that the future is a replica of the past.
As Vishal just said, there's good sugar, there's bad sugar. Your good sugar is going to be from your fruit sources and stuff like that, right? And of course, then there's refined sugar, etc., which comes under your what's been labeled as bad sugar, right? So to come down and get into certain financial terms or bringing it into play, I would say budget for it.
एक ही लक्ष्य नेशन फर्स्ट, एक ही इरादा 2047 विकसित भारत।
Welcome back. You're watching the Budget Countdown. Anish, you want to comment on the PLI scheme of things? Because this is one thing that the government introduced and it's actually worked really well for India Inc. and for a number of sectors. Most of them are coming to their 5-year period. Do you feel like more needs to be done, extensions need to come in, different types of PLI schemes, or maybe something more needs to be brought in your opinion?
Sabina, I agree. This has worked very well, and in many cases that we've seen, the incentives were set up in a way to achieve a specific result, and we've seen those results in some cases. We are on our way to seeing them in a few more cases as well. So on balance, I'd say the PLI schemes have been a great success.
Right.
The question around incentives, though, is broader, and what we discuss with many of our members at FICCI as well is that there should be an economic benefit before we ask the government for any incentives. The benefit has to accrue to the economy longer term, and that's where we'd look at possibly a few areas, but only areas where we can justify the fact that the incentive can create a long-term lasting benefit that is good for the economy, and therefore we probably would not expect the same slew of PLI schemes that we've seen in the past, maybe a few targeted ones.
And what targeted ones, Anish, are you thinking?
So at this stage, I would not have a specific industry in mind because we've been getting various input from our members to create justification for that, and we haven't finalized that as yet. But the principles behind it are ones that the incentive has to be for a specific time period and has to result in a specific action. And the example I'd give here is for electric three-wheelers. Electrification for three-wheelers, which is really last-mile mobility, as well as the small four-wheeler cargos, tempos that transport goods in cities, has gone from 0 to 20% as an industry over the last 3 to 4 years. And we expect that to reach 100% by 2030. The incentives that the government set up for that in terms of FAME 2 and now potentially FAME 3 and a PLI scheme have helped transform that industry. And by 2030, when we're 100% electric, the industry is not likely to need incentives anymore. So that's a classic example where incentives have done their work in transforming an industry, which has a major impact on reducing the fuel bill for India, as well as reducing pollution in cities, which is where the last mile is concentrated. So this is one example, but others have to follow the same suit.
You know, this reducing carbon footprint is going to become more and more significant as India becomes this power hub, right? Do you feel more on that needs to be done? Harshavardhan, you want to comment on that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I said reducing carbon footprint is going to become even more significant as we embark on this journey of becoming a manufacturing hub. What can be done, in your opinion, to sort of, encourage India Inc. to focus on that?
I think sustainability has been one of the most very important theme of the government, and going forward, we believe it is going to be. From that perspective, as Anis was talking about the example about the EVs. So yes, electric vehicles are certainly one of the areas which will help in that. Second is the renewable energy. So those are certainly some of the areas which will help in the carbon neutralization.
Shivakanta, I want to come to you on what has happened on the heels of the budget. The Karnataka cabinet has approved a draft bill mandating the 50% of management jobs and 70% of non-management roles be reserved for locals. Do you feel this state government's decision will impact business activities? And I mean, for the fear of it, other states may possibly follow.
So, Samina, this is not something that I've read upon properly, so I would be a little hesitant to comment extensively on it. But broadly, going by what I've seen in terms of the headlines, the concern certainly from an industry perspective is that will it have a sort of a cascading effect with other states wanting to do similar things. Now, having said that, it is important to see that employment generation takes place and everybody's rights are protected. But that being said, I would think that one needs to look at it a little bit more in detail, understand, the rationale one can sort of guess what it is, but how it is structured and the risks of similar cascading measures, which will then create different types of barriers. Just when we are celebrating that that GST has sort of removed internal barriers to trade.
Right. Anant, because we of course have short of time, so I want to take different questions with all of you. But Anant, why don't we come on reforms on land and labor? Now, this is what we've talked about extensively, where the center and state need to, of course, talk a little bit more in every sense. It didn't happen when the government was there in full majority. Do you feel like land labor reform should be an important objective that needs to see action sooner than later?
No, absolutely. I think there are 4 labor laws that are waiting for approval. Hopefully these will all go through, because irrespective of whether it's a coalition government or majority, hopefully all the parties are positive towards that. It will only ensure more safety and security for the workers in the factory, a higher level of simplicity in the structure. So I don't think there is anything in the current labor laws that should be opposed by one or the other. So we're hopeful that the labor laws will come into effect. The second is on the land. I think hopefully again here we can see more industrial parks, whether you call it SEZs or industrial parks kind of coming in, which will have power available more easily, simpler ways of working, simpler one-window clearance systems, because while at many state levels they do talk about red carpet treatment and one-window systems, I think if we can have a demarcated area where the rules are simple, where power is available, where there are strong ETP and STP systems, I think setting up those land banks will certainly help. And I do believe we have a lot of them that already exist but are not fully utilized. So if there's some endeavors that can be taken towards building these parks or land banks, I think that will really help industry.
Anish, export enhancement measures, would you like to hear, or would that be sort of the need of the hour to help India Inc. export more? Anything from an industry representation?
Exports is going to be one of the most important areas for us, because for us to be able to reach our Viksit Bharat goals, manufacturing has to increase multifold. And for that, while there can be some short-term measures, we would really focus on long-term competitiveness. And let's take the auto industry as an example. How can we take measures to make India the hub for manufacturing automobiles? Attract all global players to come here and set up manufacturing in India. But can we make manufacturing in India competitive, make it easy to do business, that really creates a situation where exports grow multifold, not just a small increase based on some short-term incentives?
Right. Subrikanta, one last question, just to wrap this conversation up. What are the pain points of friction that need to be addressed in your opinion? We've talked about everything we want and, of course, what the industry expects, but what are those pain point areas that you need, or maybe the budget needs to resolve to actually encourage everything we've talked about and our dreams of Viksit Bharat?
So, one point I have held for long is that, we shouldn't look at the budget for addressing everything because, governance is a 365 days exercise. So from an industry perspective, and particularly if I look at continue with my focus on the manufacturing sector, I think we should look at ways and means to reduce the interface that industry has with various regulators or state authorities. And drawing an analogy, for example, from the faceless assessment, which has worked so well when it comes to income tax, something that I strongly believe in and FICCI has advocated is if we can digitize all records, and there is enough technology available today to ensure that these can't be fudged at a later date. But if you can digitize all sorts of records that are required to be maintained by industry, and then have online inspections and keep really physical interactions and physical inspections only to the bare minimum, I think these are sorts of measures which will at one stroke do away with a lot of pain points. And the other thing, of course, is to rely on self-certification wherever possible. And again, of course, unfortunately, there will probably be somebody who tries to take advantage of that, and you can always have exemplary sort of punishment for anybody who takes advantage of concessions. But self-certification and digitalization of records, I think, are 2 points, measures which will go a long way in reducing the pain point for industry.
Right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It was such a pleasure talking to all of you. We'll hopefully see you on Budget Day and to get a reaction of what your thoughts were after the event is over. Thank you very much and have a good evening.
A powerful driver of India's growth. The Indian economy, development of all regions, technologies and innovations. Inflation is moderate. Investments are robust. More comprehensive GDP.
So, there is good debt and bad debt. I think there's debt which helps you create assets, which we would classify as good debt. For example, if you take an education loan for something which is truly a good program, good course, which is going to take you further, I think that's good debt. It'll pay back. It will take some time, but it'll pay you back well.